Morning. I just like to send Ajahn Pavaro's best wishes. So he's still fairly weak, but he's much better. And he's going to extend his stay till the 16th so that he is more fit for travel. Some of who you don't know, Ajahn Pavaro is the second monk at Tisarana, and he is about 67 years old. He was he was a professor at University of Calgary in Buddhist studies, and did the whole family thing. He had 2 sons. He's a fabulous woodworker, so we have a lot of fun in the workshop, playing around with bits of wood and making furniture. So he's got a lovely, refined sense of aesthetic that I appreciate many things about him. But of late, he's not travelled well. So when Lompo was in Temple, that was like 6 months ago or so, he got ill on the travels, and he had a bad case of shingles. You heard how he described the shingles? He said,
it was awful.
He said it's like a pair of pliers on your nipples. Oh, it was like he was in like serious pain. So we hope he gets more resilience, and he sends his best wishes. Also, I'd like to thank the kitchen crews, because I know that the kitchen is the hottest place in the monastery, and to put out a meal for so many people in such a short period of time is no small thing. So my deepest gratitude for keeping me fed and watered, and for keeping the whole sangha in these nutritious meals well provided, and all these lovely trays that come to us. It's very, very, very generous and kind, and I know one of very few things in a monastery have the kind of the time constraints of stress that the kitchen has, because you have to get the meal out by a certain time. So, Anamotana Santi to all of you for that. I was looking at the picture of Lompa Mun, and just looking at his eyes in that picture, it really, and for me, it just stops the mind. Power of that gaze or the photograph. And one of the ways that I think all of us, one of the teachings many of us have been inspired by of recently or not so recently, is the reformulation of the Four Noble Truths by Lompo Dun. The mind going out is the cause, the result of the mind going out is suffering. Mind knowing the mind is the path, the result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. And I know many of us, for me it's a very pragmatic teaching. So that part, the mind knowing the mind, one of the ways that I contemplate that is the simple noticing that I know that I know. Like right now, I know that I know. And it doesn't really matter whether I have a painful knee or there's the sound of not bluebirds, but jays outside, or whatever the sense experience might be. I know that I know is not dependent on sense experience. I know that I know. And abiding as that for periods of time, by doing what? By waiting. I know that I know, wait, is a way that I try to enact that recommendation, the mind knowing the mind. Now, the thing about that is it's not experiential in the same way the taste of yogurt is experiential, or a headache is experiential, because it's the container or the space within which experience takes place. And when we're sitting here or we're waiting, one of the things that we try to do is we try to awaken to the way things are, but quite often, because of the habitual nature of thinking, the mind goes outside to the thinking process. Mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. So it might be dullness or sleepiness, it might be planning, it might be resentment, it might be many things. And the transcendent path is not trying to resolve that in the arena of thought, because thought will never put an end to thought. It's always creating more. So the returning the mind, knowing the mind, we see so many references of that. Lompo Samedo saying, it's like this. And when he says it's like this, it's not a kind of tautology, it's like this, well, how else could it be? It's rather the silence which comes after the statement. It's like this. And then the mind knows the mind, or you know that you know. That's always available. That's always possible. So the preoccupation with the thinking mind prevents that availability because we're always in the conditioned, in the formed, in the constructed. I know that I know is not a construct. Like it's not a idea. It's not an experience of pleasure or pain. I know that I know. If one is very, very much into doing, meditation as doing, so you sit down and you do meditation, then quite often that is a preoccupation with an object. It's not bad, it can be very helpful. But the kind of non-preoccupation with the sankharas and things like that. So let's say there's an election in a country, and the results of that election are, let's say, disappointing. Now, disappointment is a sankhara, it's a construct which depends on, in this case, the result of an election. Now that object arises because it causes, and it can certainly preoccupy attention. I've heard in this country there's some attention preoccupied with that. But our life here is not, it's not about that, it's not about the worldly dhammas, although we live in a world and we need to attend to them. We need to sort that goat out, so that's part of it. But the aspiration that we have is not worldly. It's not about the world. And how do we remember that aspiration and sustain it? And simple things like that, like just sitting in a room and witnessing the thinking mind, or whatever it might be, and then, oh, I know that I know. Going over to Lumpur Man's eyes, and then just, I know that I know. And abiding as that. See what that does. If one persists in that, it does take kind of a persistence of intention. It's not the persistence of endurance. Persistence of endurance is when you have pain, things like that. But the persistence of awakening is a remembering. I know that I know. And if one remembers that and is persistent in that remembrance, then the echo of the background, the sound of silence, the language of liberation really becomes more and more dominant and is remembered as an intuited. But notice how difficult that is. Notice how throughout the day there's that preoccupation with past, future. So it's very subtle, but it's not difficult, this path of ours, in terms of like asceticism. We live a very comfortable life, obviously. It's not really about asceticism. It's more about the direction we attend to. So we need to plant the trees and make sure the goat doesn't eat the trees. You know, in Islam they say, trust in Allah and tie your camel. So you do have to tie your camel, you have to cook the food, and it has to be out by 11. But is that all there is? Is there just the tying of a camel? Is there just the organizing of this or that? Or what is that? Trust in Allah, trust in awareness, trust in knowing, trust in love, trust in being, trust in presence. So one of the lines I quite often enjoy in that same vein is presence ever absent? Is presence ever absent? Have you ever not been here, wherever here is, even though your mind might be caught up with stuff? So any language which you invent or come up across which reminds you of that aspect of the mind, knowing the mind, to me is a direction of transcendence, and that's an involution rather than an exiting out into the conditions of samsara. And yet, we have to tie the camel. We have to make sure there's gas in the car or electricity in the battery, and so on and so forth. So, some thoughts to think about. There you go.